Good morning, YouTube. This is another video. Today, I'm going to be building a gentleman's box. My daughter's boyfriend turns 21 in a couple of days, and I have about 4 working days to get this done. Now, the reason I call this a gentleman's box is because when I think of gentlemen, I think of men in suits and derbies retiring to the study for cigars and good whiskey. Well, I don't know about good whiskey, but this to me is good whiskey. Now, I don't know if you know much about whiskey, but this is a relatively inexpensive whiskey at about 40 bucks a bottle. Now, what makes this good for a gentleman's box is its bottle shape. It's flat. It lays very nice. Now, we will be using this bottle for measurements for this piece of black walnut. Now, this is my first project with black walnut, and I don't know how this is going to go. So, we need to get some boards and some measurements and get this thing ready to start assembling. So, first thing we got to do is get a straight edge. Let's do that. Since I don't have a track saw as of yet, I will be using this Bora straight edge that I got from Lowe's. Now, it's not great, but it does help me keep this circular saw in line, and it does an okay job. And just for snickers and grins, I'm going to hit it on the joiner a couple of times just to make sure that that side is good and straight. After that, we'll put it over here on the table saw and see if we can get something ripped down. So this piece of black walnut is not very straight. It's got a little bit of a cup to it, and you can see it's kind of jamming up my table saw. Really not wanting to cooperate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to flip it over and see if I can run it through that way. So while I'm flipping this over, let me tell you about this box a little bit. I don't know if y'all remember what you got for your 21st birthday. I can't remember any of the presents I got for my 21st birthday. But maybe this present will stick with this boy for many years to come. Maybe he'll appreciate it, and it'll be something he can keep keepsakes in, or maybe jewelry. Most macho 21-year-old men don't run out and buy themselves a jewelry box. But I think they would like a gentleman's box just the same. So here you can see me pondering my issue. This has got my saw bound up pretty good. I had to go get some wedges to get that run all the way through. Once I got it ran all the way through, I took that just over 5-inch piece of board and I ran it over the joiner. That way I could knock some of that cup out of it, and maybe I could take it back through my table saw a little easier next time. Now over at the planer, I'm going to run this through to where it's a 1/2 inch. Why a 1/2 inch? Well, because that's where the board wanted to go. It was only a 1/2 inch on one end and like 3/4 on the other. So I had to take quite a bit off one end, but not so much off the other. Try to keep this in mind when you're buying rough sawn lumber. It's not always the same thickness all the way through, and you will have times when you have to take it down a lot more than you thought you were going to. So spend a little bit of money and get a little thicker piece than what you're going to need, because it's inevitably going to be thinner than what you bought. So here we are at the table saw again. I got a piece that's surfaced nicely on 3 sides. It's time to bring it down to the final 5-inch dimension. Hopefully this goes better than it did getting it to this size. And like I thought, it sure did. Nice and smooth. I love having that table right at the edge of my table saw. It's a nice outfeed table. It works really, really well. So you remember how I said we were going to use this bottle for measuring? Well, this is kind of what I meant. I got a piece of 1/2 inch stock left over that I'm just kind of moving around this bottle to figure out where and how long I need these pieces to be. It's not an exact, but it gives me a rough estimate, and then I can come up with my measurements later on. It come out being like 10 by 12, and it looked pretty good. So now we're going to go over here to the miter saw. So using stop blocks on most of all the cuts in this video, I use a stop block to cut 2 sides here, and then I will readjust the stop block to cut the other sides. What this does is ensure a nice square box. If I have 2 sides that are exactly the same and the other 2 sides that are exactly the same, then it will give a beautifully square finish. Instead of trying to draw a line and end up with the exact same, I know they end up the same way this way. Once we have all 4 sides cut, we can move over to the table saw to cut the dado out for the bottom. I'm not going to put the dado stack in for this particular dado because it only needs to be a 1/4 inch wide and a 1/4 inch deep. So we're just going to run one pass, and then we'll run another pass, and that'll give me enough to make sure everything fits nice and tight. Look at that. Nice tight fit. I like it. No, this isn't deja vu. I know I did this once, but this is completely different, and you'll see why later on. Now it's time to start the miters. What I did is I cut one end of all my boards. Be sure to square up your saw before making a cut this long. After getting all the sides mitered, I go ahead and I set up a stop block to cut the other miter. Be sure to trim up any of the tear out before putting the fresh cut miter over onto the stop block. That could change your length, it could change your angle. You want to make sure it's nice and clean before you cut the second miter. Another way to do this is to lay the board down flat and use the bevel feature on your saw if you have that. You can also make this cut on your table saw with a miter gauge or a sled. Seeing both dados there, I'm going to go over to the saw and I'm going to cut off the bottom of this right below that middle dado. I also need to cut the bottom off of that one because I need to cut it off just at the top of the bottom dado. Anybody see what's going on here yet? And since I have now run the saw through that piece twice, that is unfortunately going to leave that piece too small. But that piece is going to be just perfect. So now I'm going to throw some little green clamps on the middle of these. I'm going to stretch that tape a little bit tight so that it pulls these corners nice and tight once I get it in there to glue up. I'll be using Titebond 3 to glue this up because, well, that's what I have. That's all I have. That's all I ever use is Titebond 3. Not for any particular reason, just because that's what I like to use. Does anybody else have a favorite glue? If you have a favorite glue, leave me a comment. Let me know what it is. Maybe I'll try it out. So once you fold this up, you're going to put tape on that last piece, and you're going to want to pull that pretty tight. That way you got a nice snug fit all the way around. Then, check your glue, and I pull out the tape in the middle, and I have 0 squeeze out inside because I can't get to the glue inside. It sucks. And we check for square, check for square, check for square. Everything looks good. I'm getting the tape ready for this bottom piece that I had cut off earlier. So I slide my bottom in and glue, and we put it on there and we tape it into place. While that dries, we'll go ahead and get started on the lid. So at the end of this board, there is a crack right about there. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's there, and I don't want that to be on my lid. It's about 3 inches in. So what I've decided to do, since I want to keep that wood usable, is I'm going to cut it right around 15 inches. And then I'm going to run it through the planer so I can find out if there's any more cracks that I need to cut out. I have found the piece of this board that I want to use for the top of this box. I think that looks pretty. Remember that 15 inches of board I cut off? Yeah, well, here we're going to use it. I'm going to use it to cut out 4 sides for this lid to slide into, and then we're going to cut a dado into those. I have taped a piece of 1/4 inch paneling to the top of my table saw with some double-sided tape. What that allows me to do is it gives me a 0 clearance plate for my dado stack. The reason for this is because the plate that I bought for this saw has such a wide gap, and cutting pieces that are this wide is a real concern of mine because there's just so much room for error, and I like my fingers and would like to keep them. Now that we've got the dado in them, we go back to the miter saw. And just like the box itself, I went ahead and mitered one side of each one of the pieces. And then I am able to set up the 2 stop blocks like I did on the box, giving me a nice square lid. Before I go gluing this up, I'm going to go ahead and put a miter on the inside top edge of all 4 pieces, because doing this later on will be much harder with a bearing on it. Doing it right now will give me nice clean corners on the inside of the lid. And you can see the 45-degree chamfer right there. Looks nice. Remember earlier when I said there was a piece that I'd cut that was too short? Well, that's what I'm cutting now. I took a measurement and I went ahead and ripped it, and now we have a nice tight fit. Look at how clean that looks. Unfortunately, my phone ran out of battery when I was putting the lid together, so I didn't get to show you guys any of that. But the inside of this lid has got a 6-degree bevel on it, and I'm putting a 45-degree bevel on the outside of the lid itself. What this will do is it'll kind of hide any imperfections between the lid and the box. Plus, I think it looks pretty cool. I went ahead and put a 45 on the top as well. Since I've already got the saw set up for that 6-degree bevel, I might as well go ahead and put a 6-degree bevel on this trim. This is custom trim. There's none like it. That's one of the things about custom trim. You can make it any way you want. If anybody says that you messed it up, you can just tell them, how do you know? You've never seen trim like this before. So to blend this piece of 1/2 inch trim into the box a little bit, I put a 45-degree bevel on the top of it. And see, it kind of blends that trim into the box a little bit. And then, with a 6-degree angle facing down, I ran a 1/4 inch cove bit and just kind of made it deeper as I went on. And then I moved my fence back and I used a 5/8 inch cove bit. And then I think it was a 3/4 inch cove bit. This is how it turned out. Thought I might try something different with my hinge mortise this time. I'm going to cut the edges of my hinge mortise at a 45-degree angle. Since, you know, the lid's got 45-degree angles on it, I think it'll look cool. And I was right, it did. I set my saw to a 1/4 inch in height on both the lid and the box. And if you look, you can see that I've got my miter gauge turned around. The reason for that oddity is because I don't have the grooves cut in my table yet. I don't want to cut the grooves in this particular tabletop because this particular tabletop will be disappearing before long anyways. So I'll just wait and do it in the new tabletop. After doing the lid, I got pretty comfortable with this setup. So it goes a lot faster over here on the box. Even though the table saw did most of the work, I still had a little bit of cleanup I had to do, and since my chisels aren't nearly sharp enough, I just used a razor blade, and that cleaned it up pretty well. A little bit of hand sanding and it was good to go. Since I cut the mortises out at a 45, I need to cut the hinge at a 45 as well. I just used a cut off bit for my Dremel, and it made short work of cutting these hinges, and left a pretty clean edge too, wasn't bad. So I noticed at one point when I was watching a YouTube video, I don't know if y'all do it either, but do you ever see dust on a board and you just want to blow it off, but the YouTube guy just leaves it on there? Maybe it's just me, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know how to do flocking. I think that's what it's called. So I use felt. I find my felt at Walmart. It's like $1 or maybe 29 cents a 12 by 10 sheet or something like that. Now this Super 77 from 3M goes everywhere, and you want to make sure to coat everything really well. That's why I have the tape on there, because I don't want glue on that area. And then I just kind of press my felt into place and use a knife to trim off the excess, kind of like laying carpet. It's also important to take the tape off immediately after finishing this process. This piece will be the center divider. I'm going to put a round over on what's going to be the top. I'm going to round over both sides of it so it's got a nice, I don't know, rounded profile, I guess. With that done, we can kind of start to lay out for our shot glasses. Now, you don't have to put shot glasses in a box like this, but I thought it'd be a nice little added touch. I need 3 sharp corners and 1 rounded corner. So I started with the shot glasses because, well, it needs to be that size. But I ended up not liking how small that rounded corner was going to be. So I had to find something just a little bit bigger. Lo and behold, because I leave everything lay around, the cap for the Super 77 just happened to be laying next to it. So, guess what? I'm going to use that cap. And that kind of gave me my desired rounded look. See, if I had to put everything away and kept a nice clean shop, I'd have had to go hunt for that cap. But because I'm a freaking pig, right there it was. Quick and easy. Off to the miter saw to cut that little piece out. And then we're over to the drill press. So I'm going to go ahead and drill that hole out. And if you look, I've got it sitting on top of another board. That way I don't have any tear out on the bottom. See? Look, nice and clean. Both sides. After that, we're going to go over here to the belt grinder or belt sander and clean that round edge up and make it nice and pretty. Over at the router table, I'm going to round over the edge of the rounded side, not the 2 sharp sides. I'm also going to put the round over on the inside. Be very careful with this because that bit can grab a hold and sling that part across your shop. May even grab your fingers. So you want to be very careful when doing a process like this. Off camera, I went ahead and pilot drilled the holes where the screws are going to go for this little cup holder. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the felt to one side of this board that the cup holder is going to be mounted to. I will then run some screws from the other side through the felt into the cup holder. After that, I can then spray the other side of the board, and then the screws are covered and nobody will ever be the wiser that they are there. So what I'm doing is I'm going to start a couple of screws. That way just a little C hair is sticking out on the other side of the felt. That way I can find the holes in the cup holder and then screw them down nice and tight. The clamp kind of slipped on me there a little bit, but once I got her in there solid, it's good to go. See how good that looks? Now that that's screwed good and tight, we can go ahead and spray the other side where the screws are, pull that felt pretty tight, and squish it all down. No screws, they're all hidden. Now we take a sharp knife, we cut the excess off, and we are good to go. So the drawer fits pretty nice. Slides real nice and smooth, but I want it to be very snug when it's closed. It's a secret drawer and I don't want anybody to know about it. So what I'm doing is I'm putting a couple of brass nails here right at the edge of it where it meets the box. What this will do is it'll put a little bit of clamping pressure and the drawer will not slide out. This may require a couple of test fits to get just the way you want it. Using a punch makes it easy for me to hit them nails without hitting the rest of the box. It took about 3 or 4 times and I got exactly the right clamping pressure that I wanted. It stayed in place and actually required a little bit of work to get out. After that, it's time to put it all together. I got to get this hinge on here, and then my daughter will be by later on to pick it up. So I pre-drilled everything because this is pretty hard wood and brass screws are going in these holes. Now that I got the drawer in there nice and snug, we'll take one last trip to the router. Put a little round over on the bottom. And because I think Armor Seal looks great on everything, I'm going to cover this box in Armor Seal as well. This is the interior Armor Seal. It's oil based and I think it brings out this black walnut very well. It's beautiful. So I gave the Armor Seal a day to dry before I went and mounted the lid to the box. What I did is I closed the hinge, put some CA glue on it, shot the lid with some activator and set it down on there. I gave it 5 minutes to dry and then I was able to open it up and drill the pilot holes to put the screws in. I am really happy with my decision to miter the edges of this piano hinge. I think it gives it a really cool look. And then you can see I went ahead and monogrammed the top of it for him. So that'll do it for this project. You got a nice top and lid. I don't know how many of these cigars he's going to smoke, but if he don't want them, he can always give them back. We got a secret drawer he can keep valuables in, or deeds, if he ever gets any of those. Got a pretty backside. So give me a like, subscribe, and build one of your own. Be a gentleman. See y'all later.